Hi everyone, welcome to GT Coding. In the last video we had designed this image slider using HTML and CSS. Now in this video we will add the functionality using JavaScript. So let's get started. We had already created our main.js file in the previous video, and we'll be referencing these divisions in our JavaScript file. So we'll be referencing the previous button, slides container, and these slide images inside an array, and the next button and navigation dots. So let's go over here and create some constants. And first of all we will type slide image, and here we'll type document dot query selector, and since we have multiple images we will type query selector all, and then here we will type dot slide image. Now the next thing we need is the slides container, so we'll type const slides container, and we'll type document dot query selector slides container. Next we'll reference the next and the previous buttons, so we'll type const next button equals document dot query selector next button, and const prev button equals document dot query selector prev button. And lastly we also need to reference the navigation dots division, so we'll type const navigation dots and document dot query selector navigation dots. Alright, now we'll create a function called init to place all the images in the correct positions. So we'll just type a comment over here, set up the slider, and we'll type function init, and here we have to go through all the images inside the slide image and then set the position of each of the images. So we'll be setting the left position of each of the slide image. So I'll just type a comment over here to explain to you the positions. So for slide image 1, which is the 0th position in our array, and we should set the left position of that to 0 because it should be on the screen at the beginning. And then for the slide image 1, which is the second image, we will have the left position as 100%. So what this will do is this will position the second image after the first image. So if you type 50% over here, then the second image will start from here, but we want it to be 100%. And then for the third slide image, we will set the left position as 200%. So it will position itself after the second image. So this is how we are going to position our slide images. So we will use a for each loop for this. So we'll type slide image dot for each, and in that we'll create a callback function, and we'll have two arguments over here. One is the actual slide image, and the next one is the index. So we will type img comma I. So these are the two arguments, and then we'll write the code over here. So this is an arrow function. Now for each of the slide images we have named it img. So we'll type img dot style dot left, and here we have to set 0%, 100%, and 200%. So if you want to do this for any number of images we have in our slider, we can use this index. So we'll type I multiplied by 100, and we'll concatenate it with the percent sign. So now what this does is that it will go through each of the slide images and then set the left to the index value times 100%. So for the first slide image we will have 0 as the index, so we'll have the percentage as 0 times 100, which is 0%. And then for the second slide image we will have the index as 1, so it will calculate this as 1 times 100, which is 100%, which is what we wanted over here. And in the same way for the third one we will have 2 times 100, which is 200%, and that's what we wanted over here as well. So we have positioned our slide images exactly the way we wanted. Now let's set the active class to the first slide image. So we'll type slide image 0, which is the first slide image, and we'll type class list dot add, and we'll add a class of active. Alright, now we want to call this function every time we load our page. So we'll call this function right here, and let's inspect our page and see whether everything is working alright. And here we can see for the first slide image we have the left as 0, and for the second one we have left as 100%, and for the third one we have left as 200%, and for the first slide image we also have this class of active. So everything is working alright. Now let's create the navigation dots. So we'll create a function over here. So first of all we'll type a comment, create navigation dots. So we'll create a function called create navigation dots, and we'll call this function in init, so that when we load our page the dots will be created automatically. Now we need to create the navigation dots depending on how many images we have in our slider. So first of all we need to get the number of images, so we'll create a variable over here. So we'll type let number of images, and we'll set that equal to slide image dot length. So let me just go over here and show you the result. So if you type slide image dot length, we get the value as 3 because we have 3 items called slide image. So now we'll use that in our function over here. So we'll write a for loop. So we'll type for let, we'll just name the variable I equals 0, and I is less than number of images I plus plus. So this will loop from 0 to the number of images. And here we need to create some elements. So we'll type const dot, and we'll create a division. So we'll type document dot create element, and we'll type div over here, and we need to add a class of single dot to this dot element. So we'll type dot class list dot add, and we'll type single dot, and then we need to append this dot element to the navigation dots division that we have referenced over here. So we'll type navigation dots dot append child, and here we'll type dot, and we can see the navigation dots over here. We'll also set the first one as active. So outside our for loop we will type navigation dots dot children, and we'll access the first child, and we'll type dot class list dot add active. So here we can see the first navigation dot is active. Now we'll code the functionality for the next button. So we'll create a comment, and here we'll type next button dot add event listener, and for the click event we will have a function. So we'll type an arrow function over here. Now when we click on the next button we will move the slide container division to the left. So we need to calculate how many pixels we need to move to the left. So for that we can just calculate the width of the first slide image. So we'll create a variable over here, and we'll type slide width, and we'll set it equal to slide image and the client width of the first one. So this will give us the width of this slide image. Now we want to move the slide container, which is the parent division. So if we go over here to the HTML, we can see that the slides container is the parent division. So we'll move the slides container to the left. So here we'll type slides container dot style dot transform, and we'll set it to translate x, and we have to move it to the left. So we'll type minus, then we will add the variable slide width that we just created, and we'll concatenate pixels and close the parenthesis. Alright, so now let's click on the next button and see whether it works. And we seem to have some problem over here. So let's just change this value to maybe 100 pixels. And we can see that the other images are not being shown over here. So that's the problem. If we inspect our page, we can see the second image starts from here. I think if we give some width to it, it will be alright. Alright, it works. So let's give a width of 100% to the slide image. And we'll change this back to slide width. Alright, so now if we click on the next button, we can see we get to the next image. And then if we click on the next button again, we don't have anything happening over here. That's because we have this fixed position over here. So every time we click on the next button, it will come to this fixed position. So what we'll do is we'll create another function, and we'll pass a value to that function. and depending on that value we will position the slide container. So let's cut this from here, and we'll just create a function called goToSlide, and we'll create a function over here, and we'll paste the code right here. Now what we'll do in this function is that instead of translating it to a fixed width, we will also multiply it by a number. So we'll type slide number, and we'll get that number from this function. So we'll type slide number over here, and now here we have to pass an argument to this goToSlide function. So depending on the argument we will move the slides container. So for that we'll create a new variable called current slide over here. So we'll type let current slide equals 0. So we'll start it from 0, and every time we press the next button we will increment the current slide. So we will type current slide plus plus. So this will increment it by 1, and then we'll pass the current slide over here. Alright, now let's see whether it works. So right now the current slide is 0, and when we click on the next button it will change to 1, and we'll pass 1 to goToSlide function, and then here we'll transform it by slide width, which is the width of this slide image, times 1. And then if you click on the next button again it will increase to 2, and then here we'll have slide width times 2 pixels. Alright, so let's click on the next button. So we have the next slide showing over here. We'll click on the next button once again, and now we can see the last slide is being shown. Now if we click on the next button we don't have anything being shown over here because we have only 3 images. So we also have to keep that in mind when we code the functionality for the next button. So here we will add an if condition, and here we will type if current slide is greater than or equal to number of images minus 1. So this will check whether we are on the last slide. So if you are on the last slide we want to go back to the first one. So we'll type goToSlide 0, and we'll also change the current slide to 0, and then we'll return. So if you are on the last slide then these 3 lines of code will be executed, and if that's not the case then these 2 lines of code will be executed. So let's test it out. We click on the next button and we go to the next slide, and here we have the next slide, and right now we are on the last slide. Let's click on the next button again and we go back to the first slide. So in this way we have this cycle over here. Alright, so next button is working alright. Now let's add a transition to the slides container so that we'll have a smooth animation. So we'll go to style.css, and here in slides container we will add a transition, and we'll set it to 900 milliseconds, and I have already calculated a cubic Bezier value. If you want you can come up with your own values over here. So I'll just type 0.48, 0.15, 0.18, 1. Alright, so now if we click on the next button we have this smooth animation. Now we also have a problem with our slider, that if we scroll to the right we can see all the images, so we have to hide that as well. So we'll go to style.css, and inside wrapper here we will type overflow hidden, and now we cannot scroll to the right. Alright, now let's go ahead and add the functionality of the previous button. We'll also add a comment over here, and we'll just copy this code from here, and we'll change this to prev button, and here in the if condition we have to type current slide is less than or equal to 0. So if you are all the way to the left then we have to go back to the last slide. So here we will type goToSlide number of images minus 1. So this is the last slide, and for the current slide we will copy this value over here, number of images minus 1, and here we will type current slide minus minus. So this will decrement the value of current slide. Alright, so now let's check whether the previous button works, and we can see that it works alright. So our next and previous buttons are working alright. Now the last thing we need to do is set the active classes for the current slide and these navigation dots. So every time we go to a slide, we will change the status of the active class. So here we will type set active class, and we'll create a function, and we'll type set active class. And first of all, we need to find out which is the active class right now, and then we have to remove the active class from there and set the current slide as the active class. So first we will set the active class for the slides. So here we'll type let current active equals document dot query selector, and here we'll type slide dash image dot active. So this will get us a division with classes slide, image and active applied to it. So now we have to remove the active class from that division. So we'll type current active dot class list dot remove active, and then we'll add the active class to the current slide. So we'll type slide image, and we have the current slide stored inside the current slide variable. So we'll type current slide, which we have created over here. So we have been updating it in all these functions over here, and here we'll type dot class list dot add active. Now let's inspect our page and see whether the active class is being applied. So right now we have the active class for the first slide. So let's click on the next button, and we can see now the active class is on the second slide. If you click on the previous button, the active class goes back to the first slide. So we have a bug over here. When we are on the last slide and when we click on the next button, the active class stays there. So let's fix that. So here, before we call the set active class, first of all we will set the current slide to the slide number. Now let's see whether it works. Alright, so everything is working alright. Now since we have the current slide set over here, we don't need to set it here in our previous button and the next button. So we'll just remove this line of code, and we'll also remove this line of code. Alright, so let's see whether it works. And we'll click on the next button, and the active class is being added. Alright, so now the last thing we need to do is set the active class for the navigation buttons. So we will add a comment over here. This is also almost the same as these 3 lines of code. So let's copy this and we'll paste it over here, and let's change this to current dot. And here, instead of slide image, we will type navigation dots dot children, and then we'll have the current slide over here. So this will select the right child from the navigation dots. And we also need to change the slide image to single dot. Alright, so now let's see whether it works. So let's click on the next button, and we can see that the second dot is active and everything is working alright. Now we need to add one more functionality to our image slider. That is, whenever we click on any of these dots, we should be taken to that slide. So we have to add just a single line of code for that. So we'll go over here where we have created the navigation dots, and in the for loop we will add one more line of code. So here we'll type dot add event listener, click, and we'll create an arrow function. And what we are doing over here is that while we are creating the dot element, we are also adding an event listener to that. So here we'll type go to slide, and here we will pass the value I, because the value of the I goes from 0 to the number of images. Alright, so now let's check whether it works. So we'll click on the third navigation dot, and we get taken to the third slide. So we can see that every navigation dot is working alright, and even the next and the previous buttons are working alright. Alright, so that's basically it for this video. If you have any doubts, you can ask in the comments below, and I'll also leave the link of the source code in the description below. If you like this video, please click on the like button and subscribe to this channel to get the latest video updates. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a nice day.